The fist stopped inches from her face, frozen in the harbor's midnight shadows as Laura Bennett, the youngest CEO in maritime history, whispered words that would haunt her forever. Please don't hit me. But what happened next shocked everyone, including the corrupt executives who thought they'd finally broken her. Because from the darkness stepped a man nobody expected, a single father who worked these docks for minimum wage, whose calloused hands would soon topple an empire built on blood and betrayal. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment your city below. I want to see how far this tale of courage travels tonight. The October wind carried salt and diesel across Chesapeake Harbor as Laura Bennett pressed her back against the cold metal of Container 47B, her designer heels useless against the wet concrete beneath them. At 28, she commanded a shipping empire worth $4 billion. But none of that mattered now. Not with Marcus Thorne's massive frame blocking her only escape route, his breath reeking of whiskey and malice. "Sign the papers, Laura," Marcus growled, his voice cutting through the distant foghorn. Behind him, 3 other board members emerged from between the shipping containers like predators closing in on wounded prey. "Sign them, or we'll make you wish you had." Laura's hands trembled as she clutched the folder to her chest, documents that would authorize the company to accept unmarked containers from Eastern Europe, no questions asked. She'd discovered the smuggling operation 3 days ago, buried in encrypted files her late father had left behind. Now she understood why he died in that suspicious car accident 6 months earlier. "You killed him," she breathed, the realization hitting her like ice water. "You killed my father because he wouldn't sign." Marcus's laugh was hollow, echoing off the metal containers surrounding them. "Your old man was weak, sentimental, thought he could run a business with clean hands." He stepped closer, his shadow swallowing her whole. "But you're smart, aren't you, Laura? You understand that some things are bigger than one person's conscience." The folder crumpled in her grip as she fought to keep her voice steady. "I won't be part of human trafficking. I won't." The slap came without warning, snapping her head sideways and sending her glasses skittering across the wet pavement. Laura tasted copper as blood filled her mouth, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. She'd been hit before, boarding school bullies, an ex-boyfriend who'd shown his true colors, but never like this, never with such calculated cruelty. "That's just the beginning," Marcus said, rolling up his sleeves. The harbor lights caught the scars on his knuckles, souvenirs from other negotiations that had ended badly. "Your father learned the hard way. Don't make his mistake." Laura's legs gave out, and she slid down the container's corrugated surface until she was sitting in a puddle of harbor water and motor oil. The men circled her like sharks, their expensive suits incongruous against the industrial decay of the midnight docks. She was alone. She'd come here thinking she could reason with them, convince them to stop. How naive she'd been. "Please," she heard herself whisper, hating how small her voice sounded. "Please don't hit me again." Marcus raised his fist, his wedding ring catching the light. A man who went home to a family after destroying others. "Last chance, princess. Sign or I'll make sure they never find enough of you to bury." That's when they heard it. The steady footsteps approaching through the maze of containers, unhurried despite the tension crackling in the air. The board members tensed, hands moving to concealed weapons, but the man who emerged from the shadows wasn't security or police. He was something far more unexpected. Jack Sullivan stood 6'2" in worn work boots and a faded denim jacket, his weathered face calm as a lake before dawn. At 37, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen real danger and lived to tell about it. Paint stains decorated his jeans, evidence of the boat hull he'd been working on for overtime pay. His hands, scarred from years of dock work and darker memories, hung loose at his sides. "Evening, folks," Jack said, his voice carrying the hint of a southern drawl that years in Baltimore hadn't quite erased. His eyes, gray as the harbor and storm season, took in the scene with practiced assessment. "Seems like the lady said no." Marcus turned, his face twisting with irritation. "This doesn't concern you, Doc Rat. Move along before you get hurt." Jack's gaze shifted to Laura, taking in her split lip, the way she held herself like a bird with a broken wing. Something flickered in his expression, not pity, but recognition. He'd seen that look before, in places where powerful men thought they could break whoever stood in their way. See, that's where you're wrong, Jack said, taking a step closer. Lady in distress on my docks? That concerns me plenty. Your docks? One of the other men, a thin executive named Reynolds, laughed nervously. You're just hired help. You load containers for $14 an hour. $15.50 actually, got a raise last month. Jack's smile didn't reach his eyes. But you're right about one thing. I do load containers. Know what's in every shipment that comes through here, even the ones that arrive at night, off the books, from certain Eastern European ports. The atmosphere changed instantly, electric with danger. Marcus's hand moved toward his jacket, where the outline of a gun was barely visible. You don't know what you're talking about. Container 31A arrived last Tuesday at 2 a.m. Manifest said agricultural equipment. Funny thing about agricultural equipment, it doesn't usually need air holes, doesn't usually cry either. Laura's eyes widened. This dock worker, this nobody, knew about the trafficking. He'd known all along. Marcus pulled the gun, pointing it at Jack's chest. Big mistake, hero. Should have minded your own business. Jack didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled out a battered cell phone, holding it up so they could see the recording app's red light. Already uploaded to the cloud. Also sent copies to a friend at the Herald, another at the FBI. Oh, and my lawyer. Can't forget him. You pull that trigger, and by morning your whole operation becomes front-page news. You're bluffing. Am I? Jack tilted his head. Reynolds there has a daughter at Princeton, doesn't he? Studying pre-law on Daddy's dirty money. And Garrison, that's your wife's BMW parked in Spot A12, the white one with the world's best mom sticker. Cute. Wonder how she'll explain to little Timothy why Daddy's on the evening news in handcuffs. The men exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. They'd expected fear, compliance, submission. They hadn't expected someone who'd done his homework. Here's what's going to happen, Jack continued, his voice steady as a heartbeat. You're going to put that gun away. You're going to leave this lady alone, and you're going to walk away. Because if anything happens to her, tonight, tomorrow, next year, that information goes public. Every shipment, every payment, every dirty secret you thought was buried. You don't know who you're messing with, Marcus snarled, but his hand wavered. Sure I do. Marcus Thorne, former Army supply sergeant, dishonorably discharged for selling weapons on the black market. Did 3 years in Leavenworth before reinventing yourself as a logistics expert. Jack's knowledge was surgical, precise. Your partners aren't going to be happy when they find out you've compromised the operation. The gun lowered slowly. Marcus's face had gone pale beneath the harsh dock lights. This isn't over. No, Jack agreed, but your part in it is. Get out of here, now. For a moment, nobody moved. Then, like roaches when the lights come on, they scattered. Marcus backed away, his eyes promising vengeance, before disappearing into the maze of containers with his associates. The sound of their expensive cars starting and speeding away seemed to echo forever in the sudden quiet. Jack waited until he was sure they were gone before turning to Laura. She was still on the ground, looking up at him with a mixture of shock and something else. Maybe hope. Maybe just confusion that anyone would risk themselves for her without wanting something in return. You okay? He extended a hand, careful not to move too fast, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. Laura stared at his hand, calloused, scarred, honest, for a long moment before taking it. His grip was firm but gentle as he helped her to her feet. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair, the way he carried himself like someone who'd learned to be strong because life hadn't given him any other choice. Why? She managed, her voice hoarse. Why would you help me? Jack bent down and picked up her glasses, wiping them clean on his shirt before handing them back. Because somebody should have. Because standing by while bad things happen makes you just as guilty. He paused, and something flickered across his face. A memory, perhaps, or a regret. Because I've got a daughter, and someday I want to be able to look her in the eye and tell her I did the right thing when it mattered. Laura slipped her glasses on, the world coming back into focus. This man, this dock worker who made $15.50 an hour, had just saved her life, and he wasn't asking for anything in return. The recording, she said suddenly. How much of that was real? A ghost of a smile touched Jack's lips. Enough. Been documenting their shipments for months. Couldn't do anything about it. Nobody listens to a guy like me. But maybe they'll listen to you. I don't even know your name. Jack Sullivan? He started walking toward the main dock, gesturing for her to follow. Come on, let's get you somewhere safe. You can call the police from the dock office. Laura fell into step beside him, her designer heels clicking against the wet concrete. They own the police, at least the ones who matter. Then we go higher. FBI, DEA, whoever will listen. You really think it's that simple? Jack stopped, turning to face her. In the harsh industrial lighting, she could see the weariness in his eyes, the weight of battles fought and lost. No. Nothing about this is simple. But complexity isn't an excuse for inaction. Your father knew that. Laura's breath caught. You knew my father? William Bennett was a good man. Used to come down here, talk to the workers. Not many CEOs do that. He knew something was wrong, started asking questions. Jack's expression darkened. I tried to warn him, but he said he could handle it. Said he had a responsibility to clean up his company. Tears blurred Laura's vision. They killed him for it. Yeah, Jack said quietly. They did. Question is, what are you going to do about it? They stood there in the October wind, two unlikely allies brought together by violence and circumstance. Laura thought about her father, about the company he'd built with honest work and integrity, now rotting from the inside. She thought about the crying Jack had heard from Container 31A, about all the suffering that happened in the shadows while the world looked away. I'm going to burn it all down, she said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. Every last corrupt piece of it. Jack nodded slowly. Then you're going to need help. These people don't play fair and they don't forgive. Will you help me? He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the harbor where massive ships bobbed like sleeping giants. I've got a daughter to think about. 9 years old. Her name's Lila. If they come after me, I'll protect you both. I have resources. Your resources are compromised. They control your board, your security, probably your household staff. Jack turned back to her. But yeah, I'll help. Because somebody has to, and because your father would have done the same for Lila if positions were reversed. They started walking again, passing between towers of containers that held the commerce of the world, and sometimes its darkest secrets. Laura's mind raced with plans and contingencies, but one question kept surfacing. How long have you been watching them? Since my wife died, Jack said, his voice flat. 2 years ago, cancer. Medical bills wiped us out, even with insurance. Had to take extra shifts, work nights. That's when I started noticing the off-the-books shipments. Containers that arrived with no paperwork, left with different weight distributions. And you just documented it all? What else could I do? Report it to management? They're the ones running it. Go to the media, a dock worker's word against billionaire executives? He shrugged. So I watched. I recorded. I waited for someone with enough power to actually do something about it. And you think I'm that person? Jack stopped at the door to the dock office, his hand on the handle. I think you're someone who just chose truth over comfort, justice over safety. That's rare these days, rare enough to be worth protecting. Inside the office, fluorescent lights buzzed over metal desks and ancient filing cabinets. Jack moved to a coffee maker that looked like it had survived several wars, pouring 2 cups of something black and viscous. It's terrible, he warned, handing her a mug. But it's warm. Laura took a sip and immediately understood his warning. It was possibly the worst coffee she'd ever tasted, but the warmth spreading through her chest was worth it. She sat on a cracked vinyl chair, suddenly exhausted. They'll come after you now, she said. Your daughter. Already thought of that. Jack pulled out his phone, sending a quick text. My sister lives in Virginia. She'll pick up Lila tonight. Keep her safe until this blows over. You're giving up everything to help me. Why? Jack sat on the edge of the desk, his coffee mug cradled in scarred hands. You ever been to war, Miss Bennett? Laura. And no, I have. Navy. 6 years. Saw things that don't make it into recruitment videos. Learned that evil thrives when good people do nothing. Also learned that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right despite the fear. And you're afraid now? Terrified, he admitted with a rueful smile. But I've been terrified before. You learn to function with it, like background noise. Laura studied him, this unexpected guardian angel in work boots and denim. What happened to you? In the Navy, I mean. Those scars aren't from dock work. Jack's expression closed off, a door slamming shut. That's a story for another time. Right now, we need to focus on keeping you alive and exposing these bastards. Before Laura could respond, headlights swept across the office windows. Jack was on his feet instantly, moving to peer through the blinds. Company, he said tersely. Black SUV, government plates. Laura's heart hammered. They came back? No. This is someone else. Jack's posture relaxed slightly. I think our backup just arrived. The door opened and a woman entered. Mid-40s, sharp suit, eyes that missed nothing. She held up FBI credentials. Agent Sarah Chen, I understand someone here has information about human trafficking through this port. Jack and Laura exchanged glances. How did you... Laura began. Mr. Sullivan sent me some interesting files about an hour ago, Agent Chen said, right before he confronted several board members of Bennett Shipping. We've been investigating this operation for 2 years, but we've never had someone on the inside willing to testify. I'll testify, Laura said immediately. I'll give you everything. Agent Chen's expression softened slightly. Miss Bennett, I understand you've had a traumatic evening. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we start this process, there's no going back. These people have resources, connections. Your life as you know it will be over. Laura thought about her penthouse apartment, her designer clothes, her carefully curated life that suddenly felt as substantial as smoke. Then she thought about her father, about the sounds Jack had heard from Container 31A, about all the victims whose names she'd never know. My life as I knew it ended the moment I found out the truth, she said. I'm ready. Agent Chen nodded, all business now. We'll need to get you both into protective custody immediately. Mr. Sullivan, your daughter. Already safe, Jack said. Good. We have a safe house in Annapolis. We can take your statements there, start building the case. She paused at the door. This is going to be dangerous. These people have killed before. They killed my father, Laura said quietly. I'm not running from them anymore. As they prepared to leave, Jack touched Laura's arm gently. You sure about this? Once we leave here, everything changes. Laura looked at him. This stranger who'd risked everything for her, who'd shown more integrity in one night than she'd seen in years of boardroom meetings. Everything already has changed. The only question is whether we let them win or fight back. Jack smiled then, a real smile that transformed his weathered face. Your father would be proud. They walked out into the October night together, leaving behind the familiar world of shadows and compromise. Above them, stars struggled to shine through the industrial haze, small points of light refusing to be extinguished. In the distance, a ship's horn sounded, mournful and hopeful at once, like a promise of journeys yet to come. As they climbed into Agent Chen's SUV, Laura caught a glimpse of herself in the side mirror. Her lip was still split, her designer suit ruined, her carefully styled hair a mess. But her eyes burned with a determination she'd never seen before. She wasn't the same woman who'd walked onto these docks hours ago, terrified and alone. Jack settled beside her in the back seat, his presence solid and reassuring. He pulled out his phone, showing her a photo. A little girl with his gray eyes and a smile that could light up the harbor, holding a paper boat. That's Lila, he said softly. She makes these boats, writes words on them. Hope, dream, believe. Says if you fold them right and set them free, they'll carry your wishes across the water. She sounds amazing. She is. She's everything good in this world, everything worth fighting for. He put the phone away. When this is over, when you've won, and you will win, maybe you could meet her. Laura felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with bad coffee or shock. I'd like that. Agent Chen started the engine, and they pulled away from the docks, leaving behind the maze of containers and the ghosts of violence. But Laura knew they'd be back. This was just the beginning of a war that would test everything she thought she knew about courage, about loyalty, about love. As Baltimore's skyline faded behind them, she thought about Jack's daughter and her paper boats carrying wishes across dark water. Maybe that's what they were doing now, casting hope into dangerous seas, trusting it would find safe harbor. The road ahead stretched into darkness, but for the first time since her father's death, Laura didn't feel alone. Beside her sat a man who'd chosen righteousness over safety, who'd stood between her and violence without hesitation or expectation. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, trials, threats, maybe worse, but she knew she wouldn't face it alone. "Thank you," she whispered, the words inadequate but necessary. Jack's hand found hers in the darkness, his grip warm and steady. "Don't thank me yet. This is just the first round. Then we'd better win it." "We will," he said with quiet certainty. "People like Marcus Thorne, they're bullies. They're used to fear making people comply. They don't know what to do when someone stands up to them. You stood up to them." "We stood up to them," Jack corrected. "You could have signed those papers, saved yourself." "You didn't." Outside, the city lights blurred past like falling stars. Laura closed her eyes, exhausted but unable to sleep. Every time she did, she saw Marcus's fist, felt the impact against her face, tasted blood. But then she remembered Jack's voice cutting through the darkness, calm and unafraid. "Seems like the lady said no." "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you face danger without showing fear?" Jack was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "Fear's just information. It tells you there's danger, helps you prepare. The trick isn't not feeling it. It's not letting it make your decisions for you." "Your wife," Laura said carefully. "She must have been proud of you." "Marie," Jack said, the name soft as a prayer. "She was the brave one. Fought cancer for 3 years, never complained, never gave up. Even at the end, she was thinking about others, made me promise to raise Lila to be strong, to stand up for what's right. You're keeping that promise. Trying to." "Some days are harder than others." Agent Chen's voice cut through their conversation. "We're here." The safe house was a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that screamed normal so loudly it circled back to suspicious. Inside, it was all business: computers, recording equipment, boxes of files. "We'll take your full statements in the morning," Agent Chen said. "Tonight, rest. There are bedrooms upstairs, food in the kitchen. Don't answer the door. Don't make calls except through our secured lines. My team will be watching the perimeter." When she left, Laura and Jack stood in the living room, suddenly awkward, without danger to unite them. In the harsh fluorescent lighting, Laura could see how tired he looked, the weight he carried in the slope of his shoulders. "You should call your daughter," she said. "Let her know you're okay." Jack nodded, moving to the secured phone. Laura gave him privacy, wandering into the kitchen where she found herself staring at a coffee maker identical to the one at the docks. She started a pot, the familiar routine oddly comforting. She could hear Jack's voice from the living room, soft and warm. "Hey, Butterfly." "Yeah, Daddy's okay. I'm helping someone, like we talked about. Doing the right thing even when it's hard." "Aunt Sarah's making your favorite pancakes? That's great, baby. I love you too. Sweet dreams." When he returned, Laura had 2 mugs of coffee ready, marginally better than the dock office brew. "How is she?" "Worried, but trying to be brave." "She's too young to carry so much weight." Jack accepted the coffee gratefully. "I never wanted this life for her. Violence, uncertainty, fear. I wanted her to have normal." "Maybe normal is overrated," Laura said, thinking of her own privileged but hollow childhood. "Maybe what matters is having someone who loves you enough to fight for what's right." They sat at the kitchen table, 2 strangers bound by circumstance and choice. Outside, the world went on, people living their lives, unaware of the darkness flowing through their ports, their cities, their institutions. But here, in this unremarkable house, 2 people had decided to stand against that darkness. "Tell me about the evidence," Laura said. "Everything you have." Jack pulled out a flash drive from his pocket. 2 years of documentation. Ships, dates, manifests, photographs. I know which containers hold people, which hold drugs, which hold weapons. I know which dock workers are paid to look away, which supervisors arrange the schedules to avoid inspection. And my father? Did he know all this? He suspected. Started coming down to the docks about 6 months before he died, asking questions. Smart questions. He knew something was wrong, but he didn't know how deep it went. Until they killed him for it. Yeah. Jack's jaw tightened. I should have done more. Come forward sooner. Stop. Laura reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. You're doing something now. That's what matters. They spent the next hours going through the evidence, building a timeline of corruption that stretched back years. Laura recognized names, board members she'd trusted, executives who'd attended her father's funeral with tears in their eyes while his blood was still on their hands. How did they hide it for so long? Same way all corruption hides, in plain sight, behind bureaucracy and respectability. Nobody questions a shipping company moving containers. It's what they do, and when someone does question it. Jack trailed off, but the implication was clear. They end up like my father. Or they get bought, or threatened, or they convince themselves it's not their problem. Laura stood, pacing to the window where dawn was starting to streak the sky. It is my problem now. My company, my responsibility. Our responsibility, Jack corrected. You don't fight something like this alone. She turned to look at him, this man who'd appeared from nowhere to save her, who asked nothing in return except the chance to do what was right. Why do I feel like I've known you forever? Crisis strips away pretense, Jack said simply. Shows who people really are. You're seeing me without masks, and I'm seeing you the same way. And what do you see? Someone brave enough to choose justice over comfort, someone who could have taken the easy path but didn't. He stood, moving closer but maintaining a respectful distance. Someone her father would be proud of. The tears came then, all the grief and fear and anger she'd been holding back. Jack didn't try to comfort her with empty words or unwanted touch. He simply stood nearby, a solid presence that said without words, "You're not alone." When the storm passed, Laura wiped her eyes, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I don't usually—" "Don't apologize for being human. You've been through hell tonight. We both have." "Yeah, but I'm used to hell." "You're not." Laura laughed, surprising herself with the bitter sound. "You'd be surprised. Corporate boardrooms have their own kind of violence. It's just dressed in better suits. But this is different. This is physical, immediate. It changes you." "How did it change you?" "The Navy, I mean." Jack's expression shuddered again, but this time he didn't deflect. "I was on a destroyer, Gulf of Aden, anti-piracy operations. We got intelligence about a yacht that had been taken, American citizens on board. My team was sent in for rescue." He paused, lost in memory. Laura waited, understanding that some stories needed to be told in their own time. Intelligence was wrong. It was a trap. Pirates had been tipped off, knew we were coming. Lost 3 good men that night. I took shrapnel to the back, spent 6 months learning to walk again. His hand unconsciously moved to his lower back. But that wasn't the worst part. What was? Finding out later that someone in our command had sold us out. Traded our lives for money. That's when I learned that sometimes the real enemy wears the same uniform you do. Is that why you left? Partially. Also because I'd met Marie by then, and she showed me there was more to life than anger and betrayal. She made me want to be better, to build something instead of just fighting against things. And now? Now I'm fighting again, but for the right reasons. For Lila, for your father's memory, for all the people in those containers who don't have anyone else to speak for them. Agent Chen returned then, bringing with her a team of investigators. The house filled with activity, computers booting up, phones ringing, the machinery of justice grinding into motion. Laura and Jack were separated for individual statements, their stories documented in exhaustive detail. Hours passed in a blur of questions, photographs, documents. Laura identified every corrupt board member, every suspicious transaction she could remember. Jack provided dates, times, container numbers, a roadmap of criminality that would take months to fully investigate. By afternoon, they were exhausted but determined. Agent Chen gathered them in the living room, her expression grim but satisfied. "We have enough for warrants," she announced. "Raids will begin tonight. We're going to hit them simultaneously. Offices, homes, the dock facilities. It's going to be the largest trafficking bust in East Coast history." "What about Marcus Thorne?" Laura asked. "Already in custody. Picked him up an hour ago trying to board a flight to Costa Rica." Relief flooded through Laura, followed immediately by anxiety. "The others? We'll get them. But I need to be clear about something. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. These people have resources, lawyers, media connections. They're going to come after you both, try to destroy your credibility, your lives." "Let them try," Laura said with more confidence than she felt. "There's something else," Agent Chen continued. "We've been monitoring communications. There's chatter about a shipment coming in tomorrow night, the biggest one yet. We want to let it arrive, catch them in the act." "You want to use us as bait," Jack said flatly. "Not exactly. But your presence at the docks would sell the normalcy. Laura returning to work, you at your regular shift. We'll have teams in place, full surveillance. It's dangerous," Laura said. "Everything about this is dangerous," Agent Chen replied. "But this could be our chance to roll up the entire network, including their international connections." Jack and Laura looked at each other, an entire conversation passing silently between them. "We'll do it," Laura said. "Together," Jack added. Agent Chen nodded. "We'll have you covered every second. First sign of trouble, we move in." As the agent left to coordinate the operation, Laura found herself alone with Jack again. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting everything gold. "You know this could go wrong," Jack said quietly. "I know." "You could walk away now. You've given them enough to prosecute. You don't need to risk yourself further." Laura moved closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "Neither do you." "But you're not walking away, are you?" "No." "Then neither am I." They stood there, two people who'd been strangers 24 hours ago, now bound by something deeper than circumstance. Laura thought about asking him what would happen after, when the danger passed, when life returned to normal, when a CEO and a dock worker no longer had crisis to unite them. But she didn't. Some questions were better left for tomorrow. "I should check on Lila," Jack said, breaking the moment. "Yes, you should." As he made the call, Laura watched him transform, the warrior facade melting away to reveal the father beneath, soft and warm and endlessly patient. She thought about her own father, about the legacy he'd left her. Not just a company, but a responsibility to do what was right, no matter the cost. Tomorrow, she would walk back into danger. Tomorrow, she would face the men who'd killed her father, who'd tried to break her. But tomorrow, she wouldn't be alone. She'd have Agent Chen and her team, the weight of law and justice behind her. And she'd have Jack Sullivan, a single father who folded boats with his daughter and stood against evil with quiet courage. A man who'd taught her that strength wasn't about not feeling fear, but about choosing what was right despite it. The sun set over Annapolis, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere out there, cargo ships moved through dark waters, carrying secrets and suffering. But change was coming. Justice was coming. And Laura Bennett, who'd started this journey as a victim, would face tomorrow as something else entirely. A warrior for truth armed with evidence and righteous anger, protected by an unlikely guardian who'd appeared when she needed him most. The night deepened, and still they prepared, reviewing layouts of the docks, memorizing escape routes, planning for contingencies. They were David preparing to face Goliath, armed with nothing but truth and determination. But sometimes, Laura thought as she watched Jack's focused intensity, that was enough. Sometimes one person standing up to evil could change everything. And two people standing together? Two people could bring down an empire. The secured phone rang at exactly 6 a.m., jarring Laura from restless sleep on the safe house couch where she'd dozed off reviewing doc manifests. Jack was already awake, standing by the window with coffee, his silhouette tense against the dawn light. Agent Chen's voice crackled through the speaker with urgency that made them both freeze. "Change of plans! The shipment's been moved up. It's coming in tonight, not tomorrow. We have 12 hours. Laura's stomach dropped as Jack set down his mug with deliberate calm. "They know something's wrong. Marcus must have talked. Or they have sources we haven't identified yet, Chen replied. Either way, we can't miss this opportunity. Can you both be ready? We'll be ready, Jack said, but his eyes found Laura's across the room, asking a silent question she answered with a nod. After Chen disconnected, the safe house felt smaller, the air thicker. Jack moved to the kitchen table where Laura had spread out the dock blueprints, his finger tracing the maze of containers and corridors they'd have to navigate tonight. When I was in the Navy, he said quietly, before missions, I'd write Lila letters. Just in case. He pulled out a worn notebook from his jacket. Already wrote one this morning. Laura's throat tightened. We're going to be fine. Chen has teams. Teams can't account for everything. These people are cornered animals now, and cornered animals are unpredictable. He met her eyes directly. You should call someone, family, friends, just in case. The truth sat heavy between them. There's no one to call. The company was my life. My mother died when I was 12. Father's gone now, no siblings. The people I thought were friends. She gestured vaguely. They're probably celebrating my downfall with Marcus's associates. Jack studied her for a long moment, then pulled out his phone, showing her another photo of Lila. This one was recent, taken at what looked like a school play. The girl wore fairy wings made of coat hangers and tissue paper, her smile radiant despite the humble costume. She played Tinkerbell last spring, he said. The teacher wanted to give the part to the judge's daughter, but Lila auditioned 5 times until she earned it, stubborn like her mother. His voice softened. After Marie died, I thought Lila would fold into herself, go quiet. Instead, she got fiercer, like she decided if life was going to be hard, she'd be harder. She sounds remarkable. She is. And she asks about you. Laura looked up sharply. Me? I called her last night after you fell asleep. Told her I was helping someone brave. She wanted to know everything, what you looked like, what you sounded like, if you were nice. A small smile played at his lips. I told her you were tired, but fighting anyway. She said that's the best kind of brave. Something warm bloomed in Laura's chest, unexpected and overwhelming. This child she'd never met had already decided she was worth knowing, worth caring about. It was more genuine acceptance than she'd felt from her board of directors in years. What else did she say? She wants to know if you like paper boats. Apparently that's her metric for trustworthiness now. Despite everything, Laura laughed. Tell her I've never made one, but I'd love to learn. You can tell her yourself, Jack said firmly, after tonight. They spent the morning preparing, going over every detail until they could navigate the dock layout with their eyes closed. Chen's team fitted them with microscopic earpieces and tracking devices sewn into their clothing. Laura put on her corporate armor, a sharp black suit that had once made her feel powerful, now feeling more like a target painted on her back. Jack dressed in his usual work clothes, but she noticed him tuck something into his pocket, a small folded paper boat, worn soft from handling. From Lila, he explained. For luck. The drive to the docks as afternoon bled into evening felt like approaching a storm. Chen's voice periodically crackled through their earpieces with updates. Teams in position. Surveillance active. The container ship from Odessa was 3 hours out. Laura entered through the corporate entrance, her heels clicking with false confidence across marble floors. Several employees stared. Word of last night's confrontation had clearly spread. She kept her head high, playing the part of the unbroken CEO even as her pulse hammered. Her temporary office, they'd moved her from the executive floor for renovations, overlooked the loading areas. Through the window, she could see Jack taking his position among the dock workers preparing for the night shift. Even from a distance, she could tell he was different from the others. The way he moved with purpose while appearing casual, always positioning himself to maintain sightlines. Reynolds appeared in her doorway without knocking, his thin face twisted with false concern. Laura, we heard about last night. How terrifying for you. She forced herself not to react to his presence, continuing to review meaningless paperwork. I'm fine, thank you. Marcus can be, overzealous, but his heart was in the right place. The company needs strong leadership during transitions. The only transition happening is the one where criminals are removed from my father's company. Reynolds stepped closer, lowering his voice. Be careful, Laura. You're playing a dangerous game with dangerous people. Your father learned that too late. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. The shipment tonight, it would be better if you weren't here. Laura looked up sharply. He knew she knew. The realization that Chen might have a leak made her blood run cold, but she kept her expression neutral. I have work to do. So do we all. Reynolds smiled, reptilian and cold. Some work happens in the light. Some happens in the dark. The wise know the difference. After he left, Laura whispered to her earpiece, Chen, Reynolds knows about tonight. We heard. Stay calm. Proceed as planned. Through her window, she watched the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the harbor blood red. Jack was checking container seals, playing his part perfectly, but she saw him glance toward her window, a quick check that she was still there, still safe. Her phone buzzed, not the secured line, but her personal cell. The message was from an unknown number, just 3 words. Check your email. Against her better judgment, she opened her laptop. The email contained a single video file. Her finger hovered over it for a moment before clicking play. It was her father sitting in this very office, dated a week before his death. He looked tired, older than she remembered, stress etched in every line of his face. Laura, his recorded voice began, and tears immediately burned her eyes. If you're watching this, something's happened to me. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry for leaving you with this mess. She paused the video, unable to breathe. Through her earpiece, she heard Jack's voice. Laura? Your heart rate just spiked. Are you okay? There's a video. From my father. Don't watch it alone. I'm coming up. No, maintain your position. I'm fine, but she wasn't fine. Her hand shook as she pressed play again. The company is compromised, her father continued. It goes deeper than I initially thought. It's not just trafficking. It's weapons, drugs, money laundering for cartels, and worse. Marcus Thorne is the face of it, but the real power is someone else, someone I trusted. I've been gathering evidence hidden in... The video cut to static. Laura frantically tried to replay it, but the file had corrupted or been remotely deleted. She slammed her laptop shut in frustration. Chen, someone sent me a partial video from my father. He said there's someone else behind this, someone he trusted. We'll analyze it later. The ship just entered harbor waters. 90 minutes until dock. Laura stood pacing to the window. The dock lights were coming on, one by one, like eyes opening in the darkness. She could see Jack directing other workers, his movements steady and sure, but something was wrong. There were too many workers for a night shift, and several she didn't recognize. Jack, she whispered. Unknown personnel at your 3 o'clock. I see them, he responded calmly. At least 6 unfamiliar faces. They're armed. Both of you maintain cover, Chen ordered. We're tracking them. Laura watched Jack continue working as if nothing was wrong, even as the armed men positioned themselves strategically around the loading area. Her father's words echoed, someone I trusted. Who had he trusted most? His CFO? Head of security? Or someone closer? Her office door opened again, and this time it wasn't Reynolds. Margaret Chen, the company's longest-serving board member and her father's oldest friend, entered with a sad smile. Laura had known Margaret since childhood. She'd been at every birthday, every celebration, a constant presence in their lives. Hello, dear one, Margaret said softly. You look just like William when he was determined to fix something unfixable. Margaret. Laura's voice was cautious. I didn't know you were coming in tonight. Special circumstances require special attention. Margaret moved to the window, looking down at the docks. Your father stood at this very window the night before he died. We talked for hours about legacy, about the prices we pay for power. Something in her tone made Laura's skin crawl. You were here that night? I'm always here for the important shipments, dear. Your father never understood that some compromises are necessary for survival. He was too pure for this business. The realization hit Laura like ice water. Margaret. It had always been Margaret. You, Laura breathed. You're the one he trusted. Margaret's sad smile never wavered. He trusted me to protect the company. Sometimes protection requires terrible choices. The trafficking, the smuggling, it's all part of a larger ecosystem. Without it, Bennett Shipping would have been devoured by competitors years ago. You killed him. I ordered his death, Margaret corrected gently, as if discussing a business decision. Marcus handled the details. Your father was going to destroy everything we'd built, all for some misguided moral stance. Laura's hand moved toward the panic button under her desk, but Margaret shook her head. I disabled that hours ago, and your wire, your tracking device, all blocked by the scrambler in my pocket. We're quite alone. Through the window, Laura saw the container ship approaching, massive and dark against the night sky. On the dock, Jack had noticed something was wrong, his head turning toward her window. The FBI knows everything, Laura said. You're finished. The FBI knows what we've allowed them to know. Did you really think Agent Chen was your savior? She's been feeding us information for years. The raid tonight? It's a cleanup operation. We're eliminating the sloppy operators, the ones like Marcus who've become liabilities. Laura's world tilted. Chen was compromised. They were alone. But you, dear, Margaret continued, you're William's daughter. You could be so much more than he was. Join us. Take your place at the head of an empire that spans oceans. Never. Margaret sighed. I told them you'd say that. So stubborn, just like your father. The difference is, we learned from his mistake. We won't make it quick. The door burst open, but it wasn't help. It was Garrison and 3 armed men. They grabbed Laura before she could scream, one of them pressing a chloroform-soaked cloth over her face. Her last coherent thought as darkness claimed her was that Jack would never know what happened to her. She woke to the sound of water lapping against metal and the acrid smell of rust and fear. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, her ankles bound. She was in a shipping container, the walls closing in with every breath. A single battery-powered lantern cast dancing shadows that made the space feel even smaller. Welcome back, Margaret's voice came from near the door. You've been out for about an hour. The shipment has arrived and everything is proceeding smoothly. Laura struggled against her bonds, tasting blood where she'd bitten her lip. Jack. Mr. Sullivan is being dealt with. Reynolds has him at gunpoint in Warehouse 12. He'll have an unfortunate accident soon. Dock work is so dangerous at night. Rage gave Laura strength, and she managed to sit up despite her bonds. You won't get away with this. We already have. In an hour, you'll be on a ship to international waters. You'll disappear, just another tragedy in a dangerous business. I'll mourn you publicly, take over as interim CEO to honor your father's memory. Agent Chen is about to discover that the trafficking ring was smaller than expected, limited to Marcus Thorne and a few rogue employees. Case closed, commendations all around. Margaret moved closer, her expression genuinely regretful. I didn't want this, Laura. I loved your father like a brother, but love doesn't trump survival in this world. The container door suddenly rang with impact from outside, someone pounding on the metal. Margaret frowned, pulling out her phone. What's happening? Laura heard muffled shouting, then gunfire. Not the controlled bursts of law enforcement, but the chaos of a real fight. Margaret backed toward the door, drawing a small pistol from her jacket. The door exploded inward, knocked off its hinges by something that hit it with tremendous force. Jack stood in the opening, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, a crowbar in his hands. Behind him, the dock was chaos. Workers fighting armed guards, containers being opened to reveal terrified people inside. You were supposed to be in Warehouse 12, Margaret said, raising her gun. Jack moved faster than Laura thought possible, the crowbar spinning from his hand and knocking the gun away. It skittered across the container floor as Jack rushed forward, putting himself between Margaret and Laura. Change of plans, he said grimly. Your boy Reynolds talks too much when he thinks he's won. Told me all about your setup, trying to gloat. Big mistake. Margaret scrambled for the gun, but Jack was already moving, his boot kicking it out the container door. She pulled a knife instead, the blade gleaming in the lantern light. You have no idea what you're interfering with, she snarled. This is bigger than some trafficking ring. We have connections you can't imagine. Government, military, international consortiums. I don't care, Jack said simply, then lunged. The fight was brutal and quick. Margaret might have been in her 60s, but she moved with trained precision, the knife scoring a line across Jack's ribs before he caught her wrist. They struggled, crashing into the container walls, until Jack managed to wrench the knife away and put Margaret in a chokehold. Stop fighting, he growled. It's over. Margaret went limp, and Jack released her, letting her crumple to the floor. He immediately turned to Laura, pulling out his own knife to cut her bonds. His hands were gentle despite the urgency, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? No, Jack, you're bleeding. I've had worse. He helped her to her feet, keeping one arm around her as her circulation returned. We need to move. The real FBI is en route, but Chen's people are trying to clean house. They're killing witnesses. They emerged from the container into a war zone. Dock workers with crowbars and chains fought against armed mercenaries. Some containers stood open, revealing hundreds of trafficking victims, men, women, children, blinking in the harsh dock lights. How? Laura gasped. Your father's emergency protocol, Jack explained, pulling her behind a forklift as bullets whined past. He set up a communication system with trusted dock workers. If management ever went fully corrupt, we were supposed to open every container, free everyone, make it impossible to cover up. You knew about this. I helped him design it. We just never thought we'd have to use it. A figure emerged from the smoke. Reynolds, blood on his expensive suit, a gun trained on them. You've ruined everything. Jack pushed Laura down as Reynolds fired, bullets sparking off the forklift. When Reynolds paused to reload, Jack rolled out from cover, grabbed a chain from the ground, and whipped it forward. It wrapped around Reynolds' ankle, sending him crashing to the concrete. His gun skittered away as Jack advanced on him. You told me something interesting earlier, Jack said conversationally, as if they weren't in the middle of a battleground. About how Laura would break easily, how she was just a spoiled princess playing at business. He reached Reynolds, who was scrambling backward, fear replacing arrogance. You were wrong about her. Just like you were wrong about her father. Just like you're wrong about people like me, the ones you ignore, the ones you think don't matter. Please, Reynolds begged. I have money. I don't want your money. Jack hauled him up by his collar. I want you to look at what you've done. He forced Reynolds to face the containers, where victims were stumbling into freedom, where families were reuniting with tears and embraces, where the true cost of his crimes was measured in human suffering. This is what you were protecting, Jack said quietly. This is what you killed William Bennett for. Real sirens filled the air, dozens of them, converging from all directions. Military vehicles crashed through the port gates. Not Chen's compromised team, but something bigger. Federal agents in tactical gear swarming the docks. Delta team, secure the victims, someone shouted through a megaphone. Medical units, establish triage stations. Nobody leaves this port. A familiar voice called out, and Laura saw Agent David Kim, whom she'd met briefly at her father's funeral. He'd been FBI then, too, but she'd thought he was just paying respects. Miss Bennett, Mr. Sullivan, are you injured? Kim? Laura stared. But Chen said, Agent Chen's been under investigation for 6 months, Kim explained quickly. Your father was helping us build a case. When he died, we knew something would happen soon. We've been waiting for the right moment to move. You used us as bait, Jack said flatly. We protected you as best we could while maintaining cover. Every dock worker who stood up tonight is either undercover law enforcement or a civilian volunteer we've been coordinating with for months. Laura's head spun. The conspiracy was vast, but so was the response to it. Her father hadn't been fighting alone after all. Margaret was being dragged out in handcuffs. Her composed mask finally cracked. She caught Laura's eye and smiled bitterly. You have no idea what forces you've angered tonight. This won't end here. Maybe not, Laura replied, but it ends for you. As Margaret was driven away, Jack swayed on his feet. The adrenaline was wearing off and his injuries were worse than he'd let on. Laura caught him as he started to fall, his blood warm on her hands. I need a medic, she screamed. Please, someone help. Jack's eyes found hers, gray and calm despite the pain. Lila, he whispered. Tell her. You'll tell her yourself, Laura said fiercely. You're not dying on me, Jack Sullivan. We have paper boats to make, remember? Medics surrounded them, loading Jack onto a gurney. Laura refused to let go of his hand, running alongside as they moved toward the ambulance. Around them, the port was transforming, victims becoming survivors, criminals becoming prisoners, secrets becoming evidence. Ma'am, are you family? a medic asked. We need to know for the hospital. Laura looked at Jack, unconscious now but still breathing, his face pale but peaceful. She thought about definitions of family, about bonds forged in crisis, and choices that mattered more than blood. Yes, she said firmly. I'm family. The ambulance doors closed and they raced toward the hospital, leaving the burning docks behind. Through the back window, Laura could see the container ship being boarded by federal agents. Its cargo of human misery finally ended. But in her hand, Jack's pulse beat steady and strong. A reminder that sometimes, in the darkest places, unlikely heroes emerged. Sometimes a dock worker could bring down an empire. Sometimes a CEO could choose justice over comfort. And sometimes, just sometimes, two broken people could save each other. The hospital waiting room became Laura's world for the next 6 hours. She'd refused treatment for her own minor injuries, refused to leave even when Agent Kim tried to take her statement. All that mattered was the surgery happening somewhere behind those sterile doors, where doctors worked to repair the damage from a knife that had gone deeper than Jack had admitted. At 3 a.m., a small voice broke through her exhaustion. Are you Laura? She looked up to find Lila Sullivan standing there in pajamas and a coat, holding her aunt's hand. Those gray eyes, so like her father's, were wide with worry, but also curiosity. Yes, Laura managed. You must be Lila. The little girl studied her for a long moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a paper boat, carefully unfolding it. Written inside in crayon was a single word, brave. Daddy said you were brave, Lila said simply, so I made this for you. Laura accepted the gift with shaking hands, tears she'd been holding back for hours finally falling. Your daddy's the brave one. He says bravery is meant to be shared. That's why he helped you. Lila climbed onto the chair beside Laura, small and fierce and unafraid. Is he going to be okay? Laura thought about lying, about protecting this child from uncertainty, but Jack had taught her that courage meant facing truth even when it hurt. The doctors are doing everything they can. He's strong, and he's fighting. Lila nodded solemnly, then slipped her small hand into Laura's larger one. Then we wait together. That's what family does. And so they waited, a CEO who'd lost everything and a child who still believed in paper boats, holding on to each other as dawn broke over Baltimore. Whatever came next, trials, testimony, rebuilding, they would face it together. Because Jack Sullivan had been right about one thing. Sometimes standing up to evil changed everything. But he'd been wrong about something else. He wasn't just a dock worker, and she wasn't just a CEO. They were family now, forged in fire and bound by choice. And that was stronger than any empire built on shadows. The surgeon's arrival at 5:47 a.m. made Laura's heart stop for a moment before she registered his exhausted smile. Dr. Martinez pulled off his surgical cap, revealing gray hair matted with sweat from hours of concentrated work. He's stable, he said, and Laura felt Lila's hand tighten in hers. The blade missed major organs by millimeters. He lost a lot of blood, but he's going to pull through. He's asking for both of you. Lila was already moving, pulling Laura along with surprising strength for a 9-year-old. They found Jack propped up in the ICU bed, pale but alert, his eyes lighting up when he saw them. The tough dock worker who'd faced down armed criminals looked vulnerable now, surrounded by machines and IV lines. Hey, Butterfly, he whispered to Lila, who climbed carefully onto the bed beside him, mindful of his bandages. You scared me, Lila said, her voice small but accusatory. You promised you'd always come home. I kept my promise, didn't I? I'm right here. His eyes moved to Laura, standing uncertainly by the door. You okay? She wanted to laugh at the absurdity of him asking about her welfare while lying in a hospital bed because of wounds he'd sustained protecting her. Instead, she moved closer, taking the chair beside his bed. Thanks to you. Jack, what you did was necessary, he interrupted gently. And I'd do it again. Daddy's a hero, Lila announced matter-of-factly. He saved all those people in the containers. The nurse told me there were hundreds. 437, Agent Kim said from the doorway, having followed them in. 437 people who are alive because of what happened tonight. Mr. Sullivan, Ms. Bennett, I hate to intrude, but there are things we need to discuss. Jack tried to sit up straighter, wincing at the movement. Margaret Chen. Did you get her? In custody, along with 43 others. But she was right about one thing. This goes deeper than Baltimore. We're finding connections to trafficking networks in 12 countries. The investigation will take years. And Bennett Shipping? Laura asked, though she already suspected the answer. Will be under federal oversight indefinitely. Assets frozen pending investigation. I'm sorry, Ms. Bennett, but the company your father built is effectively gone. Laura expected to feel devastated, but instead, there was only relief. The company had become a cancer, rotting from within. Better to let it die than pretend it could be saved. What about Chen? The FBI agent? Jack asked. Disappeared. Probably halfway to a non-extradition country by now. We'll find her eventually. Kim paused, his expression softening. You both did something extraordinary tonight. The Bureau wants to offer you protection, new identities if necessary. No, Laura said immediately. No more hiding. We testify publicly, whatever it takes. Jack nodded his agreement, though she could see the concern in his eyes. They both understood what that meant. Months or years of trials, media attention, possible retaliation from whoever Margaret had warned about. After Kim left, promising to return later with formal statements to sign, the three of them sat in comfortable silence. Lila had curled against her father's uninjured side, already half asleep despite the early morning hour. Laura watched them, this little family that had somehow become hers too. Where will you go? Jack asked quietly. With the company gone, your assets frozen. I don't know, Laura admitted. The penthouse is probably being searched as we speak. Everything I owned was tied to Bennett Shipping. She tried to smile. I suppose I'll have to learn how to be normal. Get a regular job, find an apartment I can actually afford. Stay with us? Lila said sleepily, apparently more awake than she'd appeared. We have a spare room. It's small, but it has a window that looks at the harbor. Laura's throat tightened. Sweetie, I couldn't impose... Shh! It's not imposing if you're family, Jack said softly. Lila's right. Until you figure things out, you should stay with us. Besides, someone needs to make sure I follow doctor's orders. Daddy's terrible at resting, Lila confided. After his back surgery, he tried to fix the roof while he was supposed to be in bed. Traitor, Jack muttered, but he was smiling. Laura looked between them. This man who'd nearly died for her, this child who'd already decided she belonged, and felt something she hadn't experienced since her father's death. Home. Okay, she said, but I'm paying rent as soon as I get a job. Deal, Jack said. Then his expression grew serious. Laura, there's something else. Your father's video, the one that got cut off. I think I know where he hid the evidence he mentioned. Laura leaned forward. Where? Remember when I said he used to come talk to the workers? He spent a lot of time in the old dock office, the one that's been closed for renovations for 2 years. He had a key, said he liked the quiet for thinking. You think he hid something there? I know he did. Saw him going in there the night before he died, carrying a box. He looked like a man preparing for war. Before Laura could respond, Lila's Aunt Sarah arrived with coffee and fresh clothes. She was Jack's opposite in many ways, petite where he was tall, chatty where he was reserved, but she had the same steel in her eyes when it came to protecting family. You must be Laura, Sarah said, handing her coffee that was blissfully better than anything from the dock office. Lila hasn't stopped talking about you. Apparently, you're going to teach her how to run a company. Aunt Sarah, Lila protested, I said when I grow up. Well, you'll have the best teacher, Sarah said, studying Laura with an assessment that felt both protective and approving. Anyone who can stand with my brother through what happened last night is someone worth knowing. The next days blurred together in a symphony of police interviews, medical checks, and media chaos. The story had broken nationally. Heiress and dock worker expose massive trafficking ring, with every news outlet wanting exclusive interviews. Laura and Jack refused them all, focusing instead on recovery and preparation for the trials ahead. 3 days after the dock confrontation, Jack was released from the hospital. Laura and Lila had spent the time preparing his apartment, which was exactly what she'd expected. Small, but meticulously clean, with evidence of a devoted father everywhere. Drawings covered the refrigerator, school photos lined the mantel, and an entire corner was devoted to craft supplies for Lila's paper boats. "It's not much," Jack said apologetically, as Laura helped him up the stairs, his movements still careful and pained. "It's perfect," she replied, meaning it. That evening, as Lila showed Laura how to fold paper boats at the kitchen table, Jack's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened, then handed it to Laura. "It's for you." The voice on the other end was cultured, elderly, and familiar. Richard Whitmore, her father's oldest friend and the one board member who'd retired before the corruption took hold. "Laura, my dear, I heard about everything. I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening. Mr. Whitmore, how did you get this number? I still have friends in various places. Listen carefully. I knew your father was gathering evidence. He came to me a month before he died, asked me to be a backup plan if something happened to him." Laura's pulse quickened. "Do you have it?" "Not exactly. But I have a safety deposit box key he gave me. Bank of Baltimore, box 1247. He said you'd know what to do with whatever's inside." After taking down the details and promising to be careful, Laura hung up and found Jack watching her intently. "We need to go to that bank," she said. "We need to tell Kim first. This could be evidence in federal cases, or it could be something else. Something my father wanted me specifically to have." Jack stood carefully, testing his balance. "Then we go tomorrow. Together." "You're supposed to be resting," Laura protested. "I'll rest when this is finished. When you're safe." That night, Laura lay in the small spare room, listening to the sounds of a real home. Lila's giggles as Jack read her a bedtime story, the creak of old pipes, the distant sound of boats in the harbor. Her designer clothes hung in a closet that was half the size of just her shoe collection at the penthouse, but she felt richer than she had in years. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Lila stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. "Daddy's asleep," she whispered, "but I thought you might want company." They sat on the bed together, and Lila pulled out a photo album. "Want to see pictures of my mom?" Marie Sullivan had been beautiful, not in the polished way Laura was familiar with, but in a real warm way that shone through every photograph. Pictures showed her teaching Lila to ride a bike, building sandcastles, dancing with Jack in their tiny kitchen. "She was sick for a long time," Lila said matter-of-factly, "but she never stopped smiling. She told me that sadness was okay, but it shouldn't be permanent. That's why I make the boats, to send sad thoughts away on the water. Your mom sounds amazing." "She was. She would have liked you." "How do you know?" Lila looked at her with those 2 wise gray eyes. "Because Daddy likes you, and he has good judgment about people. And because you're brave, but also scared, which Mom said was the best combination." "I'm scared," Laura admitted, "all the time lately." "Me too, scared they'll hurt Daddy again. Scared the bad people will come back." Lila leaned against Laura's shoulder. "But Daddy says fear keeps us sharp, keeps us careful. It's only bad when we let it make us stop living." They sat together, looking through memories of a woman whose strength lived on in her daughter and the man she'd loved. Laura found herself telling Lila about her own mother, memories she hadn't shared with anyone in years. The next morning came too soon, bringing with it new challenges. The bank was surrounded by media when they arrived, someone having leaked their destination. Jack, still moving stiffly, tried to shield Laura from the cameras while Agent Kim's team cleared a path. "Miss Bennett? How does it feel to lose everything?" "Mr. Sullivan, are you and Miss Bennett romantically involved? Will you rebuild the company?" They pushed through without answering, but Laura caught Jack's wince, not from pain, but from the implication about their relationship. They hadn't discussed what they were to each other beyond the crisis that had brought them together. She was living in his home. His daughter called her family. But what did that mean when the dust settled? The bank manager, nervous and sweating, led them to the safety deposit boxes personally. Kim waited outside. This was personal until they determined otherwise. Laura's hand shook as she inserted the key and opened box 1247. Inside were 3 items: a leather journal, a flash drive, and a letter addressed to her in her father's handwriting. She opened the letter first, Jack reading over her shoulder. "My dearest Laura, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. I'm sorry for the burden I'm leaving you, but I trust no one else with this truth. The journal contains 30 years of records, every bribe, every threat, every compromise I was forced to make to keep the company alive. I'm not innocent in this, though I tried to minimize the harm. The flash drive has financial records showing where the trafficking money went, including accounts belonging to judges, politicians, and law enforcement officials. But the real treasure in this box isn't evidence, it's absolution. You're not responsible for my choices or the company's sins. Let it burn if necessary. Build something better from the ashes. I've also included contact information for Jackson Sullivan, a dock worker who's been helping me document the recent escalation in criminal activity. If you're truly in danger, find him. He's the most honorable man I've ever met, worth a dozen board members in their expensive suits. Be brave, my daughter. But more importantly, be good. All my love, Dad. Laura was crying before she finished reading, and Jack's hand found her shoulder, steady and warm. He knew about you, she said. Before any of this, he knew you were trustworthy. He was a good judge of character, Jack said quietly. We should get this to Kim. They emerged from the bank to find the media crowd had tripled, but now there were also protesters, dock workers holding signs supporting them, families of trafficking victims thanking them, ordinary citizens demanding justice. You're not alone in this, Kim said as they drove away. The public is on your side. But public support didn't pay bills or erase trauma. Over the next weeks, as the evidence from the safety deposit box led to dozens more arrests, Laura struggled to find her footing in a normal life. She'd applied for jobs but was either overqualified or too notorious to hire. The media attention was relentless, and threatening letters arrived daily despite police protection. Jack, meanwhile, was fighting his own battles. The dock workers' union wanted him to run for president, to lead reform efforts. But he couldn't return to physical labor yet, and the medical bills were mounting despite insurance. It was Lila who provided the unexpected solution. Why don't you work together? She said one evening over dinner, spaghetti that Laura had somehow not burned, a minor miracle. Daddy knows boats and shipping. Laura knows business. Start something new. Jack and Laura exchanged glances across the table. It wasn't impossible. The government was seizing Bennett Shipping's assets, but some legitimate contracts needed to be fulfilled. There would be opportunities for new companies to fill the void, especially ones dedicated to transparency and ethical practices. Sullivan and Bennett Logistics, Laura said slowly, testing the words. Bennett and Sullivan sounds better, Jack countered with a slight smile. We could focus on verified ethical shipping, full transparency, regular inspections, worker ownership shares. Laura's mind was already racing with possibilities. We'd need startup capital. The reward money, Laura said suddenly. The FBI mentioned a reward for the trafficking bust. It won't be much, but it's a start, Jack finished. They spent the rest of the evening planning, Lila contributing ideas with the unfiltered wisdom of childhood. By midnight, they had a basic business plan sketched out on paper, some of it on Lila's construction paper, but that seemed appropriate somehow. Partners? Laura asked, extending her hand across the table. Partners, Jack agreed, shaking it firmly. But as their hands held perhaps a moment longer than necessary, Laura knew they were discussing more than just business. The way he looked at her, the way she felt when he was near, it was becoming harder to ignore. That night, unable to sleep, Laura found Jack on the small balcony, watching the harbor lights. Couldn't sleep either, she asked, joining him. Pain's worse at night, he admitted, but also thinking. About the business? About us. He turned to face her fully. Laura, I need to be honest. You've been through trauma. We're living in close quarters. Emotions are high. I don't want you to feel obligated. Jack, she interrupted softly. Do you remember what you said that first night? About crisis stripping away pretense? Yeah. Then you know I'm not here out of obligation. I'm here because nowhere else feels right anymore. He was quiet for a long moment, and she thought she'd said too much. Then he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. Marie made me promise to live, really live, after she was gone. For 2 years, I've just been existing, going through the motions for Lila. Then you crashed into my life. Literally, in that container yard, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to fight for something beyond survival. I'm complicated, Laura warned. I have trauma to work through, a reputation that might never recover, and I apparently burned spaghetti 3 times out of 4. I'm a single father with a hero complex, medical debt, and a daughter who's already planning our wedding, Jack countered. She is. Found her journal. She's designing your dress. Apparently it needs pockets for paper boats. Laura laughed, the sound carrying across the harbor. Practical. I like it. Jack stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. This is probably too fast. Definitely too complicated, and possibly a terrible idea. Probably, Laura agreed, leaning into his touch. But since when have we made safe choices? Their first kiss was gentle, careful of his healing injuries and their fragile new beginning. It tasted like hope and possibility, like 2 broken people choosing to heal together. Gross, Lila's voice came from the doorway, but also about time. Can we plan the business now? I have ideas about the logo. They separated, laughing, and Jack scooped his daughter up with his good arm. It's past midnight, Butterfly. Way past bedtime. But this is important! Laura needs to know about my idea for boat tours where we teach kids about ethical shipping. As they went inside together, debating logos and boat tours and the possibility of an office cat, Laura felt the truth settle into her bones. Her father had been right. Sometimes you had to let things burn to build something better from the ashes. And what they were building, this unlikely family, this new business, this life carved out of tragedy and triumph, was already better than anything she'd had before. The threatening letters continued to arrive, and Margaret's trial loomed on the horizon. There would be days of testimony ahead, nights of nightmares, moments of doubt. But there would also be Lila's laughter, Jack's steady presence, and the slow, careful construction of something real and good. A week later, they stood in the old dock office where her father had spent his last days. Jack had been right. Hidden in the walls, they found more evidence, but also personal items. Photos of Laura growing up, letters he'd never sent, and a business plan remarkably similar to what they'd developed. He wanted to start over, Jack said, reading through the papers. Shut down Bennett Shipping and build something ethical from scratch. But they killed him before he could. No, Jack corrected gently. He planted the seeds. We're just finishing what he started. Laura picked up a framed photo from the box. Her father at the docks, surrounded by workers, all of them laughing at something off camera. Jack was in the background. Younger, less worn by life, but recognizable. He saw you, she said wonderingly. Even then, he saw who you really were. He saw who we could be together, Jack replied, wrapping his arm around her. Even if we didn't see it ourselves yet. As they stood in that dusty office, surrounded by evidence of her father's dreams and determination, Laura understood that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about transformation, about taking something corrupt and making it clean, about choosing love over fear. The phone in Jack's pocket buzzed. Agent Kim with an update. 3 more trafficking networks had been uncovered using their evidence. Hundreds more people freed. Each revelation was a vindication, proof that their sacrifice had meant something. But the real victory was smaller, quieter. It was Lila teaching Laura to fold paper boats with words like hope and family and forever written inside. It was Jack singing off-key in the shower, finally allowing himself moments of joy. It was Laura learning to cook without burning things, finding purpose beyond corporate power. Margaret had been wrong about one thing. Laura hadn't lost everything when Bennett Shipping fell. She'd been freed from it, liberated to find something worth so much more than money or influence. She'd found a family, and that was worth any empire. The courtroom felt like a tomb despite being packed with reporters, spectators, and federal agents. Laura smoothed her simple black dress, bought from a department store with money she'd earned tutoring business students, a far cry from her former designer wardrobe, and tried to steady her breathing. Beside her, Jack sat rigid in his only suit, his hand finding hers under the table as Margaret Chen was led in, wearing orange and shackles. 6 months had passed since that night at the docks. 6 months of building their new life while preparing for this moment. Margaret looked older, grayer, but her eyes still held that calculating coldness that had fooled Laura's father for decades. The prosecution calls Laura Bennett to the stand. Jack squeezed her hand once before letting go, and Laura walked to the witness chair on legs that felt disconnected from her body. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Dana Rodriguez, had prepared her for this, but nothing could truly ready someone to face their father's killer. Ms. Bennett, Rodriguez began gently, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Margaret Chen was my godmother, Laura said, her voice carrying across the silent courtroom. She held me at my baptism. She attended every birthday party, every graduation. She spoke at my father's funeral about how much she loved him. And when did you learn about her involvement in criminal activities? Laura's eyes found Margaret's, holding that cold gaze without flinching. The night she tried to have me trafficked. The night she admitted to ordering my father's murder. The courtroom erupted in whispers until the judge's gavel restored order. Rodriguez walked Laura through that night. The video from her father, Margaret's confession in the office, waking up bound in a shipping container. Every detail felt like reliving the nightmare, but Laura pushed through, her voice growing stronger with each revelation. She said my father was too pure for the business, Laura testified, that his moral stance would have destroyed everything they'd built. She presented his murder as a practical decision, like cutting a problematic department. Margaret's attorney, a slick man named Harrison Blackwood, who defended mob bosses and corrupt politicians, stood for cross-examination. Laura had been warned he would try to discredit her, paint her as traumatized and unreliable. Ms. Bennett, you've lost everything, haven't you? Your company, your wealth, your social standing? I've gained far more than I've lost, Mr. Blackwood. But surely you must feel anger toward my client. After all, she represents the system that destroyed your privileged life. Laura felt Jack's presence behind her in the gallery, steady as a lighthouse. I feel anger toward your client because she murdered my father and trafficked human beings. My privilege was built on blood. Losing it was a liberation. Blackwood tried another angle. You're currently living with Jack Sullivan, the dock worker who allegedly saved you. Isn't it true you're romantically involved? Objection, Rodriguez called out. Relevance goes to the witness's state of mind, Your Honor. Ms. Bennett may be confusing trauma bonding with reality. The judge allowed it, and Laura straightened in her chair. Yes, Jack and I are together. We're also business partners in an ethical shipping company that's employed 40 of the dock workers your client's organization left jobless. We're building something honest from the ashes of Bennett Shipping's corruption. How touching, Blackwood sneered. A fairy tale ending. Tell me, Ms. Bennett, isn't it convenient that you found happiness while my client faces life in prison? Perhaps you've embellished certain details to ensure that outcome? Before Laura could respond, the courtroom doors burst open. A young woman stumbled in, thin and haunted, her arms bearing the scars of restraints. She looked directly at Margaret with eyes full of rage and pain. You don't remember me, the woman said, her accent Eastern European. I was just cargo to you, Container 31A. Security moved to escort her out, but Judge Harrison held up a hand. Let her speak. My name is Anya Volkov. I was taken from my village in Ukraine, promised work in America. Instead, I spent 3 months in containers, moved like freight. Her voice broke. I watched my sister die in one of those boxes. She was 16. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Laura saw Margaret's composure crack for just a moment, not with remorse, but with annoyance at the interruption. This woman, Anya pointed at Laura, and that man, indicating Jack in the gallery. They saved us. They opened the containers. They gave us back our names. Judge Harrison looked to the prosecutors. Is this woman on your witness list? She is, Your Honor. Anya Volkov, scheduled to testify tomorrow. Then she'll wait her turn. But, the judge turned to Blackwood, I suggest you reconsider your strategy of attacking Ms. Bennett's credibility. This court has little patience for victim blaming. Laura's testimony continued for 3 more hours. She detailed the financial records her father had hidden, the network of corruption that had infected not just Bennett Shipping, but dozens of companies and government offices. By the time she stepped down, Margaret's defense looked shaken. Jack was waiting in the hall during the lunch recess, pulling her into a careful embrace. His injuries had healed, but she knew he still had nightmares about that night, still checked the locks obsessively, still positioned himself between her and any potential threat. You did amazing, he whispered into her hair. It's not over. Blackwood will go after you next. Let him try. Jack pulled back to look at her. I faced worse than lawyers. Lila ran up then, having been watching from a separate room with Sarah. Laura, you were like a warrior queen. Did you see Margaret's face when Anya came in? Lila, Sarah scolded gently. This isn't a game. I know, Lila said seriously, but Laura still won that round. That afternoon, Jack took the stand. Blackwood immediately went on attack, trying to paint him as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge and fortune. Mr. Sullivan, you were making $15.50 an hour before this incident, correct? Yes. And now you're co-owner of a shipping company with Miss Bennett. Quite an upgrade. Jack's jaw tightened, but his voice remained level. We started that company with reward money and a loan that I'll be paying off for the next decade. Every dock worker has an ownership stake. It's not about personal gain. No? Then what is it about? It's about Container 31A, Jack said simply. About hearing children crying in boxes meant for cargo. It's about William Bennett, a good man who was murdered for trying to do right. It's about my daughter growing up in a world where standing up to evil doesn't get you killed. Very noble. But isn't it true you have a history of violence? Dishonorable discharge from the Navy? Rodriguez shot to her feet. Objection! Mr. Sullivan received an honorable discharge with commendations. Blackwood smirked. My apologies, I was thinking of someone else. But the damage was done. The suggestion of violence planted in jurors' minds. Jack's hands clenched on the witness chair arms, and Laura could see him fighting to maintain composure. Mr. Sullivan, Blackwood continued, you claim Margaret Chen confessed to ordering William Bennett's death. But you were fighting at the time, weren't you? Adrenaline pumping, fear clouding judgment. How can we trust your recollection? Because I recorded it, Jack said calmly. The courtroom stirred. This was new. The recording from Jack's phone had been corrupted in the fight, deemed unusable. I had a backup device, Jack explained, pulling out a small USB drive from his pocket, sewn into my jacket lining. Old habit from the Navy. Always have redundancy. Blackwood's face went pale. Your Honor, this is inadmissible. We haven't had time to verify. You've had 6 months of discovery, Counselor, Judge Harrison said dryly. If Mr. Sullivan had additional evidence, you should have found it. I'll allow it. The recording was crystal clear. Margaret's voice admitting to ordering the murder, discussing the trafficking operation, threatening Laura. Several jurors looked sick. One elderly woman was crying. Margaret stood suddenly, despite her lawyer's attempts to stop her. You want to know the truth? She said, her cultured voice filling the courtroom. Yes, I did it all. William was going to destroy an empire worth billions. He was weak, sentimental. The world runs on compromise, on necessary evils. I kept Baltimore's economy alive, provided jobs, maintained order. By trafficking humans, Rodriguez asked, by doing what needed to be done. You think legitimate shipping is clean? Every major corporation has blood on its ledger. I just refuse to pretend otherwise. So you admit to ordering William Bennett's murder? Margaret looked directly at Laura. I admit to saving Bennett shipping from his naive idealism. If that required his removal, so be it. Business is war, and in war, people die. Her lawyer sank into his chair, defeated. The judge called a recess, but the trial was effectively over. Margaret had hung herself with her own arrogance. Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was overwhelming. Jack shielded Laura and Lila as they pushed through the crowd toward Agent Kim's waiting vehicle. But one reporter's question made Laura stop. Miss Bennett! Margaret Chen says you're naive like your father. How do you respond? Laura turned, finding the camera. If believing human beings aren't cargo is naive, then I'll wear that label proudly. My father died trying to stop this evil. Today, his vision won. What about Bennett Shipping? Will you try to reclaim it? Bennett Shipping is dead, Laura said firmly. But Sullivan and Bennett Logistics is very much alive. We're proving ethical business isn't just possible, it's profitable. We're hiring, by the way. Anyone who wants to be part of something clean, something good, can find applications on our website. In the car, Lila bounced excitedly. We have a website. As of this morning, Laura smiled, Your Aunt Sarah helped me build it. With my boat logo? Front and center. Jack took Laura's hand as they drove away from the courthouse. It's over. The trial may be, but Margaret was right about one thing. This goes deeper. There are others out there, other operations. Then we keep fighting, Jack said simply. Together. That evening, they received word. Guilty on all counts. Margaret Chen would spend the rest of her life in federal prison. Reynolds and Garrison had already pled guilty in exchange for testimony. 43 others were facing various charges. Laura felt no triumph, only a hollow relief. Justice had been served, but it couldn't bring her father back, couldn't erase the trauma of those trafficking victims, couldn't undo the years of corruption that had poisoned Baltimore's ports. Hey, Jack said softly, finding her on the apartment balcony. Where'd you go? Just thinking about my dad, wondering if he'd be proud. He would be. Jack wrapped his arms around her from behind, careful and warm. You did what he couldn't. You brought them down. We did it. I couldn't have survived without you. You're stronger than you think, but I'm glad you didn't have to find out alone. Lila joined them, squeezing between them with a paper boat in her hands. This one had justice written on it in careful cursive. For the water, she explained, to carry the word where it needs to go. They walked down to the harbor together, past the loading docks where everything had started. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Other dock workers were there, men and women who'd stood up that night, who'd opened containers and fought armed guards with nothing but crowbars and courage. Miss Bennett! Mr. Sullivan! Old Tommy, the senior dock supervisor, called out. Heard the news! Drinks are on us tonight if you're interested. Thanks, Tommy, Jack replied. But we've got something to do first. They stood at the water's edge, and Lila launched her paper boat. It caught the evening breeze, sailing out toward the open sea where massive cargo ships waited to dock. But these ships were different now, inspected, verified, clean. Sullivan and Bennett Logistics had 3 contracts already, with more companies reaching out daily, wanting to be associated with ethical shipping. Daddy, Lila said thoughtfully, are we rich now? Jack laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. No, Butterfly. We've got debts, loans, and about 1,000 problems to solve. But we're together, Lila pointed out. That makes us rich, right? Laura knelt down to Lila's level. The richest, she agreed. As they turned to head to the dock workers' celebration, Laura's phone rang. Unknown number, but something made her answer. Miss Bennett? The voice was young, nervous. My name is Carlos Mendez. I work for Hartman Shipping in Miami. We have a problem. Containers coming in from South America that don't match manifests. After seeing what you did in Baltimore, I was hoping. Could you help? Laura looked at Jack, who'd heard enough to understand. He nodded without hesitation. We'll be there in 2 days, Laura said. Keep documenting everything, and be careful. After she hung up, Jack raised an eyebrow. Miami? Lila's never seen palm trees, Laura pointed out. Field trip, Lila cheered. This could be dangerous, Jack warned, though he was already calculating logistics. If Hartman Shipping is compromised like Bennett was, then they need what we have. Experience, connections, and a really good lawyer. Laura smiled. Besides, you said it yourself. We keep fighting. Together, Jack finished. They joined the celebration at Murphy's Bar, where dock workers toasted them with beer and whiskey, where Anya Volkov sang a Ukrainian song of freedom, where the ghosts of that violent night were temporarily held at bay by community and hope. But even in celebration, Laura could feel the pull of the next fight. Miami was just the beginning. The corruption Margaret had revealed was a cancer spread across global shipping, and someone had to cut it out. You're planning, Jack observed, sliding into the booth beside her while Lila played darts with the workers. Always. Miami's going to be complicated. Hartman Shipping is 3 times the size Bennett was. We'll need help. Kim mentioned the FBI wants to create a task force, combine federal agents with private sector expertise. You want to make this official? Laura turned to face him fully. I want to make this permanent. The company, The mission. Us. Jack's eyes softened. Laura Bennett, are you proposing? I'm proposing we stop pretending this is temporary. Lila already has us married in her head. Sarah's been calling me her sister-in-law for months. Even the lawyers assume we're together. We are together. Then let's make it real. All of it. Laura pulled out a folded paper from her pocket. Not a boat, but a business document. Full partnership agreement for Sullivan and Bennett Logistics. Equal shares, equal say, equal risk. Jack read through it, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled out his own paper, a simple note in Lila's handwriting that said, "Say yes, Daddy." She knew you were going to ask? Laura stared. She helped me pick this out. Jack reached into his jacket, pulling out a small box. Inside was a simple silver ring with a tiny compass rose engraved on it. Not expensive, nothing like the diamonds she'd once worn, but it was perfect. It was Marie's, Jack said quietly. She told me to give it to someone who'd help me find my way again. Laura, you didn't just save those people in the containers. You saved me from disappearing into grief and anger. You gave Lila hope that families can grow after loss. Will you marry us? Did you just say marry us? It's a package deal. Me and the butterfly. Laura kissed him in answer, not caring that the entire bar erupted in cheers, that Lila was dancing on a table shouting, "She said yes," before Laura had actually said anything. Yes, she said against his lips, to all of it. The business, the marriage, Miami, whatever comes next. Even if what comes next is dangerous. Especially then. We're good at dangerous. 6 weeks later, they stood in a small courthouse in Miami, having just testified in the first arrests of the Hartman shipping case. Lila was their flower girl, spreading paper boats instead of petals, each one carrying a word: hope, love, family, justice, forever. Jack's vows were simple. You taught me that broken things can be rebuilt stronger. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. I promise to stand beside you in every fight, to be your anchor in every storm. Laura's were equally direct. You showed me that integrity matters more than inheritance, that family is chosen, not just born. I promise to help you raise Lila, to build our company on truth, and to never stop fighting for what's right. The judge who married them was the same one who'd signed the arrest warrants for 17 Hartman shipping executives that morning. In my 40 years of law, she said, I've never seen two people forge love from such darkness. May your marriage be as strong as your convictions. As they kissed, sealing their union, Miami's harbor stretched behind them through the courthouse windows. Ships moved in and out, but now under watchful eyes. Sullivan and Bennett Logistics had opened a second office, hired 50 employees, and had contracts with companies across the Caribbean. Mrs. Sullivan Bennett, Jack whispered, ready for the next adventure. Always, Mr. Sullivan Bennett. Lila tugged on their joined hands. Can we go to the beach now? I want to launch the special boat. The special boat was one they'd all made together, with family written in 3 different hands. They launched it from Miami Beach as the sun set, watching it sail toward the horizon where sky met sea. Think it'll make it to Baltimore? Lila asked. Boats carry wishes, not cargo, Laura reminded her. It'll go where it needs to. A couple walking past stopped. Excuse me, are you Laura Bennett? The one who exposed the trafficking ring? Laura tensed, but Jack's hand on her back steadied her. I'm Laura Sullivan Bennett now. And yes. Thank you, the woman said simply. My daughter was in one of those containers. She's home now because of you. After they left, Laura leaned into Jack's solid presence. That never gets easier. It shouldn't. The day we stop feeling the weight of it is the day we become like Margaret. Laura's phone buzzed. Agent Kim with intelligence about suspicious shipping patterns in Los Angeles. The work never ended, but neither did their determination. Los Angeles next? Jack asked, reading over her shoulder. Lila's never been to Disneyland, Laura pointed out. Business and pleasure? Our specialty. They walked back along the beach, Lila between them, hands linked. 3 people who'd found each other in violence and chose to build something beautiful from the wreckage. The empire they were creating wasn't built on money or power, but on truth, justice, and the radical belief that doing right mattered more than doing well. Behind them, the paper boat carrying family floated on, traveling currents they'd never see, carrying their wish to shores they'd never know. But that was the nature of hope. You sent it out into the world and trusted it would find its way. And sometimes, against all odds, it did. The Los Angeles operation nearly killed them all. What started as routine surveillance of suspicious containers at the port of Long Beach became a nightmare when they discovered the trafficking ring had ties to a Mexican cartel that didn't just move people, they eliminated threats with brutal efficiency. Jack still had the scar across his shoulder blade from the blade that had barely missed his lung, and Laura's hand still shook sometimes when she remembered the gasoline they'd poured around the warehouse where she'd been held for 16 hours before the FBI found her. But they'd survived, testified, and watched another network crumble. 47 arrests, 300 victims freed, and Sullivan and Bennett Logistics had grown to 3 offices with 200 employees, all partial owners, all committed to the mission. The little apartment in Baltimore felt like a lifetime ago as they sat in their modest house in Annapolis, 2 years after that first night at the docks. "Daddy, you're doing it again," Lila said, now 11 and perceptive as ever. She'd found him standing at the window at 3 a.m., watching the street. "Just checking," Jack said, though they both knew he was looking for threats that logic said weren't coming. "Mom's fine," Lila said, and Jack's heart still stuttered when she called Laura that. It had started naturally about 6 months after the wedding, and Laura had cried for an hour the first time. "She's in the office reviewing contracts." "At 3 a.m.? You know how she is before a new operation." Jack did know. Tomorrow, they were flying to Seattle to investigate North Star Shipping, but this time was different. This time, they'd received intelligence that someone high up in North Star knew they were coming, had prepared for them. Agent Kim had warned them to reconsider, but they'd already committed. 3 informants inside North Star were counting on them. He found Laura in their home office, surrounded by shipping manifests and surveillance photos. Her reading glasses were perched on her nose. She needed them now after too many nights straining over documents. The stress of the last 2 years showed in the permanent worry line between her brows and the gray streaking through her hair that she refused to dye, wearing it like a badge of honor. "You should sleep," he said, kissing the top of her head. "Look at this," she said instead, pointing to a manifest. "Container weights don't match. Same pattern we saw in Miami, but more sophisticated. They're learning from the others' mistakes." "Laura." He spun her chair to face him. "We need to talk about Seattle." "If you're going to suggest I stay behind again," "I'm going to suggest we both stay behind. Let Kim's team handle this one." Laura studied his face, seeing the fear he tried to hide. They'd had close calls before, but Los Angeles had been different. The cartel had known their names, had photos of Lila at school. They'd increased security, moved houses, but the threat felt constant now. "We have informants counting on us," Laura said quietly. "People who risk their lives to get us information. And Lila needs parents who come home. She needs parents who show her that doing right matters more than being safe." It was an old argument, one they'd had variations of before every operation. Jack knew she was right. They'd built their reputation on being willing to go where others wouldn't, to take risks law enforcement couldn't, but the stakes kept rising. "Remember what you told me that first night?" Laura continued, "about courage not being the absence of fear but acting despite it? That hasn't changed. We've changed. We have more to lose now." Laura stood, wrapping her arms around him. He could feel her trembling slightly. She was scared too, just better at hiding it. "Which is exactly why we have to go. The people in those containers have everything to lose. We're their only hope." "You sound like your father." "I hope so." Layla appeared in the doorway, blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "Family meeting." "Did we wake you, Butterfly?" Jack asked. "No, I was reading about Seattle." "Did you know their port handles 20% of West Coast trafficking according to FBI estimates?" "You hacked my computer again," Laura said, though there was pride mixed with the scolding. "You need better passwords. Paperboat 2025 is pretty obvious." Despite the tension, Jack laughed. His daughter was too smart for her own good, already showing the same instinct for investigation that had served them well. She'd been their secret weapon more than once, spotting patterns in data that adults missed. So, Lila continued, climbing into Jack's lap despite being almost too big for it. When do we leave? We leave tomorrow. You stay with Aunt Sarah, Laura said firmly. That's what you said about Los Angeles, and look how that turned out. The reminder hit like cold water. They'd left Lila with Sarah during the Los Angeles operation, thinking she'd be safer. The cartel had found her anyway, though FBI protection had kept her safe. The experience had changed her. She was more serious now, more aware of the danger that shadowed their work. This time is different, Jack said. We have better intelligence, better protection. This time you have me, Lila interrupted. I've been training with Agent Kim's daughter. Self-defense, situational awareness, emergency protocols. I'm not a little kid anymore. You're 11, Laura pointed out. 11 3/4, and I've already helped crack 2 cases from my computer. Remember the Houston manifests? I found the pattern everyone missed. She wasn't wrong. Lila had inherited Jack's instinct for danger and Laura's analytical mind, a combination that made her remarkably useful despite her age. But she was still their daughter, still the little girl who made paper boats and believed in happy endings. If you come, Jack said slowly, ignoring Laura's sharp look, you follow every rule. No exceptions. Jack, Laura started. She's right. Keeping her close might be safer than leaving her as a separate target, and Kim's team can protect 3 as easily as 2. Laura wanted to argue, but she saw the logic. Their enemies had proven they could find Lila anywhere. At least together, they could watch over her themselves. Fine, Laura said, but we do this smart. Full FBI backup, constant communication, and the minute something feels wrong, we abort. Since when do we abort missions? Lila asked. Since we became a family, Jack said firmly. The mission matters, but you matter more. The flight to Seattle was tense. They traveled under aliases, part of Kim's new protocol. Sullivan and Bennett Logistics was too well known now, their faces recognized in every major port. They'd become symbols of the anti-trafficking movement, which made them targets for every criminal organization moving contraband through American waters. Kim met them at a safe house in Tacoma, his expression grim. We've had a development. Our informant inside North Star was found dead this morning. Apparent suicide, but we know better. Which informant? Laura asked, though she already dreaded the answer. Marcus Chen, Margaret's nephew. Laura felt the blood drain from her face. Marcus had reached out 6 months ago, claiming he wanted to make amends for his family's crimes. He'd provided good intelligence on several operations, earning their cautious trust. It's a trap, Jack said immediately. They knew we were coming, used Marcus to lure us here. Probably, Kim agreed, but there are still containers coming in tonight. If we don't act, more people die, Laura finished. We know. I'm pulling FBI support, Kim said. This is too dangerous, even for you two. 3, Lila corrected from where she was setting up her laptop. And you can't pull support. We're private citizens. We go where we want. Your daughter's as stubborn as you both, Kim muttered. We learned from the best, Laura said, studying the port maps. Look, if they're expecting us at the main terminal, we go in through the old fishing docks. Same approach Jack used in Baltimore. Those docks are controlled by the Tanaka clan, Kim warned. Japanese Yakuza. They don't get involved in trafficking, but they don't like trespassers either. Then we make a deal, Jack said. The Yakuza hate the cartels. Enemy of my enemy. Kim shook his head. You're talking about negotiating with organized crime. We're talking about saving lives, Laura countered. How many people are in those containers tonight? 50? 100? Based on heat signatures, at least 75. 75 people who won't see tomorrow if we don't act. Kim was quiet for a long moment. I can't officially sanction this, but I can have teams standing by just outside jurisdiction. You get in trouble, call, and we'll find a reason to respond. It was the best they could hope for. As Kim left, Jack started checking their equipment, cameras, recording devices, the encrypted phones that had saved them more than once. Laura worked with Lila on the digital side, hacking into port security cameras to map guard patterns. There, Lila pointed at her screen. Every 40 minutes, there's a 12-minute gap in coverage at the northeast corner. That's our window. Our window? Jack raised an eyebrow. You're staying in the van. The van that'll be parked right in the middle of Yakuza territory? Sure, that's much safer. She had a point, though Jack hated admitting it. Every option carried risk now. They'd angered too many powerful people, exposed too many operations. The miracle wasn't that they were still alive. It was that they kept finding people willing to risk everything to help them. As if reading his thoughts, Laura's phone buzzed. Unknown number, but she recognized the voice immediately. Captain Yamamoto of the Tacoma Police, one of the few clean cops left in the city. Mrs. Sullivan Bennett? I heard you were in town. My grandmother would like to meet you. His grandmother was Akiko Yamamoto, matriarch of the Tanaka clan. They'd just gotten their invitation to negotiate. The meeting took place in a restaurant that hadn't changed since the 1950s, all wood panels and paper screens. Akiko Yamamoto was 93 years old, 4 feet tall, and radiated power like a nuclear reactor. She studied them with eyes that had seen wars, both literal and figurative. You're the ones disrupting the shipping business, she said in accented but perfect English. We're disrupting the trafficking business, Laura corrected politely. Same thing these days. Akiko sipped her tea. The Chen woman, she was your godmother? Yes. Family betrayal is the deepest cut. I knew her, decades ago. Brilliant woman, but no honor. Honor matters more than brilliance. We need passage through your docks tonight, Jack said directly. He'd learned that the Yakuza respected directness. To stop the containers. Yes. The ones carrying people from my homeland. Akiko's expression darkened. Japanese citizens sold like cargo. This angers me. Laura leaned forward. Help us stop it. Why should I? You're already marked for death. The Norteños cartel has $1 million bounty on you. The Russian Bratva wants you disappeared. Even some of our American agencies would prefer you stopped talking. Helping you makes me their enemy. Because you have granddaughters, Leela said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at the 11-year-old who'd been silent until now. I saw the photos in the hall. 3 girls, about my age. What if they were in those containers? Akiko studied Lila for a long moment, then smiled. A real smile that transformed her ancient face. You raised a wise child. Very well. You have passage. But if you're caught, we never met. Understood, Jack said. One more thing, Akiko added as they stood to leave. The trap waiting for you isn't at the port. It's at your safe house. Change locations immediately. They didn't question her intelligence. Within an hour, they'd relocated to a motel on the outskirts of town, paying cash, staying off the grid. Sure enough, Kim called an hour later to report that the safe house had been hit by a professional team. If they'd stayed, they'd be dead. Night fell like a curtain over Puget Sound. They approached the port through the Yakuza-controlled docks, where guards looked the other way as they passed. The 12-minute window Lila had identified was their only chance, and they moved through it like ghosts, Jack leading with Laura behind, and Lila between them despite every parental instinct screaming to leave her behind. The containers were exactly where their intelligence indicated. 3 40-foot boxes painted to look like legitimate cargo, but equipped with hidden ventilation systems. Jack could hear them inside. Whispers in multiple languages, crying children, the sound of humanity compressed into metal boxes. We need bolt cutters, Laura whispered, but Jack was already moving, pulling tools from his pack. They'd just cut the first lock when lights blazed around them. 20 men emerged from hiding places, all armed, all wearing the tattoos of the Norteños cartel. At their center stood a man Laura recognized from FBI files, Eduardo Reyes, known for skinning informants alive. The famous Sullivan Bennett family, Eduardo said, his smile all teeth and malice. You've cost us millions, destroyed years of work, but now you'll help us send a message. Let the people in the containers go, Laura said steadily. They're innocent. Nobody's innocent, but they're valuable, so they'll live. You 3, however. He pulled out a knife that gleamed in the harsh lights. You're going to die slowly, on camera, as a warning to anyone else who thinks they can play hero. Jack stepped forward, pushing Lila and Laura behind him. You want me. Let them go. Such nobility. Your Navy files said you were brave. Let's see how brave you are when I start with your little girl. That's when Lila did something unexpected. She pulled out her phone and hit a button. Suddenly, every screen in the port, security monitors, shipping computers, even Eduardo's own phone, lit up with the same feed. Live footage of the container's contents being broadcast to every major news outlet in the country. Smile, Lila said calmly. You're on national television. If you kill us, millions of people will watch. If you run, you might make it to international waters before the FBI arrives. Your choice. Eduardo's face went through several expressions: rage, calculation, fear. Behind them, sirens were already approaching. Kim's teams, responding to the broadcast, had their excuse to enter. You clever little bitch, Eduardo snarled, raising his gun toward Lila. Jack moved faster than thought, throwing himself between the gun and his daughter. The bullet caught him in the chest, spinning him around. Laura screamed, catching him as he fell, his blood warm on her hands. Too much blood, too fast. Daddy? Lila dropped beside him, her clever confidence crumbling into childhood terror. Eduardo advanced, but suddenly the night erupted in gunfire. The Yakuza had decided to intervene, honoring their agreement in their own way. Eduardo and his men found themselves caught between Japanese killers and approaching FBI agents, a crossfire that left no good options. Laura pressed her hands against Jack's wound, feeling his life pulsing out between her fingers. Stay with me. Don't you dare leave us. Protect her, Jack whispered, his eyes finding Lila. Both of you, be strong. We're all going to be strong, Laura insisted. Together, remember? That's the deal. The next minutes were chaos, FBI agents swarming the port, medics rushing to Jack, Eduardo being dragged away in handcuffs screaming about revenge. The containers were opened, victims stumbling out into freedom. But Laura saw none of it, focused only on Jack's increasingly pale face as they loaded him into the ambulance. The surgery took 9 hours. 9 hours of Laura and Lila holding each other in another hospital waiting room, their clothes still stained with Jack's blood. The news was playing their story on every channel. The 11-year-old girl who'd outsmarted a cartel, the family who'd risked everything to save strangers. This is my fault, Lila sobbed. I thought I was being smart, but I just made him mad. No, Laura said firmly, lifting Lila's chin. You saved everyone in those containers. You gave the FBI reason to come. Your dad would be proud. Would be? He's going to be fine, right? He has to be fine. Laura didn't answer because she didn't know. The bullet had done massive damage, missed his heart by millimeters. Even if he survived, the doctors warned he might never fully recover. Agent Kim arrived around hour 6, looking exhausted but satisfied. Eduardo flipped. He's giving us everything, routes, contacts, the whole network. This is bigger than anything we've uncovered before. I don't care, Laura said flatly. Not if Jack dies for it. He won't die, Lila said with sudden fierceness. He promised he'd always come home, and Daddy keeps his promises. As if summoned by her faith, Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway. He's out of surgery. Critical, but stable. The next 24 hours will tell us everything. They were allowed to see him briefly, just long enough for Laura to kiss his forehead, for Lila to whisper that she loved him, for them both to promise they'd be there when he woke up. If he woke up. The vigil that followed was the longest night of Laura's life. She'd thought she'd lost everything when her father died, when her company crumbled. But that pain was nothing compared to the possibility of losing Jack. He'd become her anchor, her partner in every sense. Without him, the mission meant nothing. Mom? Lila said around 3 a.m. It was the first time she'd used the word since Jack had been shot. Tell me about when you and Daddy first met. The real story, not the one you tell reporters. So Laura told her about that night at the docks, the fear, the violence, but also the immediate recognition of finding someone who would stand against evil no matter the cost. She told her about the safe house, about learning to make paper boats, about choosing love in the midst of chaos. He saved me, Laura finished, in every way a person can be saved. You saved each other, Lila corrected. That's what family does. Dawn came slowly, painting the hospital room gold. Jack's eyes fluttered open just as the sun cleared the horizon, finding them immediately. "Hey," he whispered, his voice rough but real. "Did we win?" Laura laughed through her tears. "We're alive, the containers are empty, and Eduardo's going to prison forever. I'd call that a win." "And you?" He looked at Lila. "My brave, too smart butterfly?" "I'm grounded, aren't I?" Lila asked. "For life," Jack agreed, then winced. "Or at least until you're 30. Dr. Patel's assessment was cautiously optimistic. The damage was severe, but Jack would recover. It would take months of therapy, possibly years before he was fully himself again. He'd never be able to do the physical work he'd once done at the docks. "Good thing I married a CEO," Jack said. "I'll be the company's strategic advisor." "You'll be the company's co-president," Laura corrected. "Full recovery or not, we're equal partners, always." But even as they celebrated Jack's survival, they knew something had changed. The Seattle operation had nearly cost them everything. They'd pushed their luck too far, too often. There would always be another port, another trafficking ring, another Eduardo Reyes. But there was only one Jack, one Lila, one family they'd built from ashes. "We need to evolve," Laura said a week later as they prepared to leave Seattle. Jack was in a wheelchair, temporary but still jarring to see. "We can't keep doing this. The direct confrontations, the undercover work. We have to find another way." "Training others," Jack suggested. "Teaching port workers, law enforcement, shipping companies how to spot trafficking, building a network instead of trying to be everywhere ourselves." "The Sullivan Bennett Institute," Lila added, "for ethical shipping and anti-trafficking education." They looked at each other, this battered but unbroken family, and saw the future taking shape. Not the adrenaline-fueled operations that had defined their last 2 years, but something more sustainable, more powerful. They would become teachers instead of warriors, building an army of people committed to keeping the ports clean. "But first," Jack said, reaching for both their hands, "we go home. We heal. We remember how to be a normal family for a while." "We've never been a normal family," Lila pointed out. "Then we'll learn," Laura said. "Together." The flight back to Baltimore felt like a victory lap and a retreat all at once. They'd won in Seattle, 75 people freed, a major network destroyed, but the cost had been nearly fatal. As Jack dozed in his seat, still weak from surgery, Laura made a decision. "No more," she whispered to Lila. "No more operations that could take him from us." "Or you from us," Lila added. "We all matter equally." They landed to find their house filled with flowers, gifts from dock workers they'd helped, FBI agents they'd worked with, even some former Bennett shipping employees who'd found new lives after the company's collapse. Among them was a package from Japan, origami cranes from Akiko Yamamoto with a note, "For the wise child who saved her parents." That night they sat on their porch overlooking the harbor where it all began. Jack was in his wheelchair, but his color was better, his grip strong as he held Laura's hand. Lila sat between them, folding a new paper boat. "What word?" Laura asked. "Future," Lila said, showing them her careful lettering. They launched it together from the small dock behind their house, watching it catch the evening current. The harbor was busy with legitimate shipping now, Sullivan and Bennett logistics containers among them, all transparent, all clean. "What do you think our future looks like?" Jack asked. "Teaching," Laura said. "Building the institute, making sure no one else has to fight alone like we did." "Growing up," Lila added, "maybe normally for a change." "And staying together," Jack finished. "No matter what comes next." The paper boat disappeared into the distance, carrying their word toward tomorrow. Behind them the phone rang, probably another port needing help, another crisis requiring attention. But for this moment, they ignored it. They'd earned the right to rest, to heal, to be just a family watching the water. The empire they'd built wasn't made of money or influence, but of lives saved and truth told. They'd traded everything they'd once been, CEO, dock worker, innocent child, for something infinitely more valuable, each other. And as the stars appeared over Baltimore Harbor, reflecting on water that had seen so much violence and redemption, they knew that was enough. They'd fought the darkness and emerged scarred but victorious. Now it was time to teach others to carry the light. The war against trafficking would continue, but their part in it was evolving. From warriors to teachers, from fighters to builders. The Sullivan Bennett Institute would be their new battlefield, education their weapon, hope their ammunition. Tomorrow, they would begin planning. Tonight, they would simply be. Three souls who'd found each other in the midst of horror and chosen to build something beautiful from the wreckage. A family forged in fire, tested by violence, and proven unbreakable. The future stretched before them, uncertain but no longer frightening. They would face it as they'd faced everything else, together.